Tonight's debate on France 24. Can Europe's anti-austerity revolt defeat the dogma of budget cuts? Italians have just given more than half of their votes to anti-rigor candidates, propelling the satirist Beppe Grillo to centre stage and reviving Silvio Berlusconi on another populist platform. To gauge the ripple effects, I'm joined by a distinguished panel: Massimiliano GAMBARDELLA, a former election candidate for Beppe Grillo's five-star movement. Hello to you. Gérard Dussillol, chairman of the Public Finances Department from the Thomas More Institute. Hello.
Hello.
Toni, Cruanyes, correspondent for the Spanish TV3 channel. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
And also Yves Bertoncini, director for the think tank Notre, or Our Europe. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening. And also joining us from Athens by phone, briefly in this first half, Thrasy PETROPOULOS, deputy editor of EnetEnglish, the English language news site of Greece's daily paper Eleftherotypia. Let's start firstly with you, Massimiliano GAMBARDELLA. So far today, Beppe Grillo has said no deal at all with any of the established parties. Do you think that he can really hang on to that position?
Yeah, of course. For sure we will have no deal with nobody. But it means not that we will have no government or something like this. Our idea is that we have a deal with a good idea. So if the other party, they will give a good idea, of course we will support. But we will never support bad idea.
But have there been any good ideas from many of the other parties in the campaign?
They just talking a lot. We want to see the fact. Because during the campaign, they used to say something, but never the truth. So we will see in reality what they want to propose in the parliament, and we will judge in the parliament.
Okay, but no coalition in any case for the five-star movement. I want to bring in Thrasy PETROPOULOS from Athens. Good to have you with us. What is the view of this Italian election from Greece, which is, of course, another country that's suffering from major economic challenges?
Well, it's being followed extremely closely, as you'd imagine. I suppose one of the feelings is that a similar sort of pattern is emerging from after the two Greek elections in May and June of last year, where you went through the whole process of the elections, and then a case of political limbo, I suppose, a certain vacuum, and it seems to be getting so fragmented, where at the time when it's confusing, really. It's a confusing message. Do we want to go forward with more austerity, or are we going to actually embrace this, the anti-austerity side? So, we're watching it very closely, because the last thing anyone wants in Greece is the eurozone crisis to reignite badly, because it's not going to be in anyone's favour. But it's a similar pattern of political fragmentation and political vacuum.
Despite that fragmentation, though, we should point out that the anti-establishment coalition in Greece, Syriza, actually ended up working with the government, didn't it, on certain issues. So is this good or bad for this Italian election for anti-establishment forces in Greece?
Well, I don't think Syriza is working with the government, and it's got a comfortable position as a main opposition party. There's been an opinion poll out today, and they're actually just have their noses ahead. There's no prospect at the moment of an election here. So it's easy to refer to a party like Syriza as anti-bailout. That's how I often see it referred to. But if there were to be an election and they did get in, there's no way to reverse this, because we're so far down the road. So austerity is pretty much here to stay for the moment in Greece.
Okay, well, let's bring it back to the studio. Toni, Cruanyes, so how do you think this has been seen in Spain so far? This rise of the populist politician Beppe Grillo?
Well, I think we would all agree that something is going on in Europe in terms of most of the people being dissatisfied by what the governments are doing. What I think we are seeing lately is on the one hand, this protest against what is going on, about the crisis, about the politics as usual, it doesn't work anymore. But at the same time, the fact that people in national elections are voting for parties with no experience in government, or even that represent something completely new in different ways, is actually also a message going to Brussels and to Berlin or Frankfurt, where people feel that the big decisions are being taken. So at the same time, I think this is an expression of something important going on. But at the same time, people think that national elections are not important anymore. And this is why they vote for parties like, they are very different, but for example, Golden Dawn in Greece, or, for example, Beppe Grillo in Italy. I think this is the reason why we're seeing these different ways of reacting to the crisis.
If I can address the French side of the debate, so to speak, you're both French people, but do you think that something like Beppe Grillo could happen in France, this kind of entirely internet-based campaign, no sort of trappings of traditional politics at all? What do you think?
Well, at least so far it did not happen. In Germany, there is a pirate party which gained a kind of support. I mean, not a wide one, but in France we have our, let's say, populist party, which is a National Front. National Front had quite a good result last presidential election. But it's true that the system in France is more or less organized around the alternative between the left and the right, with the National Front on one hand, and then the Communist Party and what is around the Communist Party today, meaning the Left Front, and it is quite structured, let's say. The difference with what has happened in Italy is that we can see a new force based on citizens, on movements and social movements, pro-environment movement, in a system which is locked. And we feel, I mean, I feel that, of course, there is a kind of call for a regeneration of Italian political life. And by the way, this shows that there is a national message in this election in Italy. Because, of course, there is a general context, a context of crisis, difficult, very harsh crisis, a context of Europe meaning more austerity in some countries in one way or another. But what is striking in Italy is that there is a national dimension. I mean, a kind of mistrust vis-à-vis the political system of Italy, and we should also not forget this national dimension.
Gérard Dussillol, do you agree with that? France is too locked down to produce this kind of alternative?
Basically, yes. You know, the populist parties exist in France. They got 33% of the ballots over the last election, and they are always at this level. You know, don't forget that after the war, during let's say mid-80s, the Communist Party was always at an average level of 23-25%, and you had additional marginal rightist parties, and you are in the range of 28-30. Now we are in the range of 30-33. And the difference is that populist parties are part of the establishment in France, which is totally different of what's happening in Italy. But there is also a big difference, is that in Italy, in 1992, with the Mani Pulite operations, you know, all the political class mostly disappeared. And it disappeared in a very difficult situation, because the lira has to be devalued in the same year. So that brought some large new air for new politicians, but there is still a very strong reluctance with politicians in Italy that probably doesn't exist yet in France.
So France is still a very different situation. But just to come back to Massimiliano Gambardella, what sort of example do you think this, what resonance do you think your leader might have in other European countries?
Okay, first of all, I don't want to talk of my leader, because, the Five Staff movement is something totally different from what we have in Europe, in the other country. First of all, we have no leader. Beppe Grillo is just somebody that is a front man, but he not decide nothing. with the site on the online platform. And it's true, we are internet-based, but we are not only internet-based. We have a local group, a local meetup. Even in Paris, we have a meetup. I'm part of the meetup of Paris. And we have a meetup around the world, even in Sydney or San Francisco, whatever. And third, we have, I really don't understand why you talk about left, right. We are totally outside this kind of system. We are not a populist like Front National or Parti Communiste on the other side. We are no right and no left. Our method is just a method of solution. We want to open the door of the institution to the citizen. This is why I would say we are transversal from the complete party that you have in France and also in Italy and in Europe. It's just the method that change. We don't want to destroy or whatever. We want just to change the method. We want to have a next step. So not left and right, but open the door to the citizen. I will just give you a little example of what we do. We have a website. Citizen can just, militant, can just put the idea, the law or whatever in the website. And when the law just have the 20% of like, our deputy have to put in the parliament. So citizens are not left or right. We have just a good idea or bad idea. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. Stop.
Well, I like to say that, so it's very difficult to talk about populism in general, because it's true. I mean, we're talking about very different kinds of parties, and I completely agree that the program that Beppe Grillo had in this election has nearly nothing to do with Front National in France, or, I repeat that because it's probably the most scary one, Golden Dawn in Greece. But at the same time, I think they are reactions to something that, yes, it's the same what is going on in Italy, in France, in Greece, in Norway, and in Spain. There's this affectation. I mean, there's an opposition to what is going on. And I think the most important thing that we should do is just not ask why they are growing, these parties, but why we are letting them grow. I mean, I think what we should do is to see what's going on in Europe that more than anywhere else. It doesn't happen in Brazil. It doesn't happen in the United States. It doesn't happen in Japan. We don't regenerate our elites quickly to actually face the real problems. I think we do have an endogamic problem. And this is something that happens in Italy, but it also happens here. We were saying that the National Front in France is part of the establishment. Well, this is truth. This is something true because we're talking about 30 years of history of being there. But at the same time, it's a lie because they are not in institutions. The system here nearly forbids them to actually get into the National Assembly or get the real representation of their votes. So I think we can say, well, here is not important because it's not in the institutions, but this is not true. I mean,
it's part of the system.
It's there. It's there. I don't know if you could call them inside or outside the system, but they are them, and they are them to stay.
Just before we go to you, Yves, let's get a quick reaction from our guest in Athens, Thrasy PETROPOULOS. Does any of what Toni Cruanyes is saying resonate with you in terms of whether you can group all these very different political forces into something called European populism? Is that a description that fits?
Well, if it fits anywhere in Greece, actually exclusively within Syriza, really, in itself is actually a coalition of mostly left-wing parties, and it's very, very popular amongst the youth. A youth which is showing 62% unemployment rate between 16 and 24-year-olds. So it goes without saying that they're getting the vote of anyone under a certain age. However, if you're going to put the extreme right-wing party Golden Dawn into the populist area, it's a completely different discussion. And I agree completely. It's like no other right-wing party in Europe. We're talking about an openly racist party. A party that Evangelos Venizelos, the former finance minister and the leader of PASOK, just this week referred to as needing to be outlawed from Greek politics because it's a Holocaust Holocaust denier, and was so extreme that in itself was a form of violence. So I wouldn't put that together. But if you're talking about populism, then yeah, Syriza is attracting a very big vote, and it's going to get bigger. That's for sure.
Thank you very much, Thrasy Petropoulos, and just that you're only joining us for this half, so I'd like to thank you already. We've got just a minute before the break, so Yves Bertoncini, you wanted to join in there.
Yes, 3 quick elements. The first one is that there is only one common point for all of the so-called populist movements. It's not an expression I like, but there's one common point saying that the traditional political elites have failed and they should be replaced. That's the only one. Apart from that, there are very differences, and of course there is xenophobia for Golden Dawn. There is no xenophobia for the Cinque Stelle movement, for example. First thing. Second thing, the thing is that there is no rise of populism everywhere in Europe. If you take the last elections in the Netherlands, for example, there was no rise. On the contrary, if you take the last election in Cyprus, it's the same. And third,
well, there was no rise in the Netherlands because they were already high, so
but there was no rise. It was said that there would be a rise. It was not the case. No rise in Germany, for example. Mm-hmm. And third thing, beyond populism, let's look at peoples. The problem we have now in Europe is that it's not, the classical cleavage, meaning Europe and the people, Europe against the people. This cleavage exists more or less, but there's another one. It's even more striking. It's that some peoples are against other peoples. You have different views. If you look in Germany, not the populists in Germany, there are almost none. Not the populists in Finland, the people in Finland. They are not thinking the same thing as the one in Greece or in Spain. And that is the major problem in Europe at the moment. This new cleavage between people, not only the populism against the elites, it's the peoples having different views of the situation, of the remedies to be adopted to go away.
Final word on that, Toni Cruanyes?
No, yeah, I agree completely, and I think that's something that will grow, which is Euroscepticism somehow. I mean, the North, people from the North being fed up with paying to bail out countries from the South, and countries from the South being fed up of being imposed, some leaders, like in Italy, from the North. That's the perception, and that is a real risk of something big going on.
So general Euroscepticism, but still a cleavage within the peoples about what the remedies are. We're going to have a break now, thanks to Thrasy Petropoulos from Athens, who's not joining us in part 2. But do join us after the news in just a few minutes for the second part of our debate.